Okay, there's a little bit more on this meat thing, and specifically to do with meat and belief. Because it came from a video I made a couple of days ago called Believe in Meat, where I was talking about this analogy between atheism and vegetarianism. You know, now, of course I recognise that analogies are just mental functions, they don't represent any kind of objective facts in the outer world, they're just, you know, representing how thinking works, but, you know, to that extent they're really useful. But it's got me thinking, but I think in that one it came up with this idea to do with, does it make sense to say you don't believe in meat? And someone in the comments section said something about, yeah, but meat's real, you know, you can point to those pinky slabs in butchers' shops, and there is the evidence, objective evidence for something that exists out there in the world. So I just want to go over that a little bit in my mind, see if I can make kind of sense of, well, just what I mean when I say that meat doesn't exist. Or it makes sense, I should say, qualify that, it makes sense to say that I don't believe in meat. Or for a person, not necessarily myself, to say I don't believe in meat. Okay, a couple of analogies, or no, not analogies, a couple of parallels. I was watching a video by Just Spook this morning, and he mentioned that story, which I don't know if it's true or not, but that story about Eskimos or Inuits having a large number of names for different kinds of snow. I think he said 14, but elsewhere I've heard it's like 57 or 84 and all kinds of different numbers for snow. Now I don't know if that's true or not, but let's just say, for the sake of arguing, that that certain peoples have names for different types of snow that we don't have, and that's quite possible, I would think. You know, if you're a specialist in something because of necessity, it is likely you're going to carve up the world that you live in different ways to people who are non-specialists. So let's say there are different kinds of snow. And then one day, due to some catastrophe, global warming, whatever, something, every Eskimo and every Inuit on the face of the earth is wiped out. All trace of the language disappears. If that happens, does those kinds of snow, or some of those kinds of snows, disappear? You know, does the particular type of snow that's been identified by those peoples and which exists as a word in their language and presumably exists as a concept in their minds, but which does not exist in any other language, does not exist in a concept of any other mind, does that snow still exist as a thing? Does it make sense to say that kind of snow relating to that concept, that word, still exists? I think it doesn't. I think it doesn't exist. And I think if it doesn't exist at that point, it doesn't exist in an objective sense prior to that point. Up to that point, it was a linguistic, sociological, phenomenological construction, as most things are, but it's most evident in that case. I think you know, that kind of snow is a product of the people and the environment and the language that made it. And I think something like that exists with meat. Let me just see if I think of other examples. This isn't a very good example, but the idea of the self or consciousness is one of those. Does it make sense to say that consciousness doesn't exist? Because there's nothing more self-evident than consciousness, is it? You know, if you're at all Cartesian in your thinking, and we all are, then you know the only thing you can't doubt is the existence of your own mind. So does it make sense to say that consciousness doesn't exist? Well, yeah, I think it does, and there's lots of evidence to say that it doesn't. Or qualify that, it doesn't exist in an objective sense, it exists as a construct. There's a really nice neurologist called Zeki who's written quite a bit on this. Got an essay, The Disunity of Consciousness, somewhere. I think I'll see if I can find a link to it. He's got a good blog as well, actually, Zeki, which again I'll try to link you to. And lots of other people, you know, Marvin Minsky kind of talks about this, you know, any Jerry Fodor, any analysts who talk about mind and consciousness in modular terms, that it's made of bits that come together to form this apparent unity, are essentially making arguments saying that gestalt that's formed out of those modules, out of those bits, out of the coming together of that disunity is are basically arguing in support of that consciousness is a construct, and as such it doesn't really have an objective existence. And you could say the same about meat. See if I can think of a third example. I don't know, I mean, we use other examples all the time. Like we use impulse energy, don't we? Impulse or impetus. You know, if we roll something and across the surface and it rolls and then goes slower and slower and then stops, we might say, oh, it ran out of energy or it ran out of impulse or something like that. But it's wrong, you know, it stops because of the friction of the tabletop. We know that in a perfect Newtonian universe, if we rolled it, it'd keep rolling forever at that speed. Things only slow down because they're acted on by outside forces, like friction. But that's not how our minds work. Our minds phenomenologically construct fictitious entities like impulse energy or impetus that we kind of award to these objects and pretend that rolling objects or arrows thrown into the air or objects rolling downhill, we say these things have got this energy and feel it. It's not just a trick of the language. It does intuitively feel like these things have got this stuff in them, just keeping them going, and when it eventually drains away the object will stop. And that's what people used to think in ballistics even, until comparatively recently. But it's not true. It's in that case, this kind of sociological, quasi-scientific, intuitive construction. And I think you could say the same thing for meat. You know, if there was no carnivores in the world, yes, if there were no carnivores in the world, and therefore there would be no language, nothing in the English language certainly for this thing called meat, then just like the snow of the Eskimo, it would cease to exist linguistically, conceptually and sociologically. If you think of it in terms as a composite, which it undoubtedly is, in the same way that consciousness is a composite, you know, meat is an artificial construct made up of the tissues of animals, and you can break those tissues down, and it's completely artificial what we designate as, you know, which particular combination of ingredients we designate as meat. So it doesn't have that kind of an ontological status. And you know, in the same way that something like impulse energy or vril or luminiferous ether or any of the other mythical substances that populate proto-science and intuitive logic, wrong, just like those, you know, meat has this status as some kind of essential substance, but it isn't, it's a construct. Alright, I'll leave for now.